We're going to get to the ratings in a moment, but on the road there, because it ties to AEW Dynamite, and a lot of the listeners have been sending this in today because it has gone up on Twitter. The Meltzer said what Twitter account? A fight or...
Said what?
I shouldn't call it a fight. An argument or a discussion? Well, I'll hear this with you.
A spirited debate.
Dave Meltzer and Bryan Alvarez about Sheeta getting a title shot against Mercedes Moné. However, she's facing Deonna Purrazzo the night before on Friday. They had a Deonna Purrazzo video on Dynamite.
Yeah, she was sitting there drinking wine, issuing a prepared dramatic reading, and it made me want to drink.
AEW should have a liquor sponsor. It would make a lot of sense. But let's go to this. It's broken up into a couple parts, but we could break it up even further as we review it from the Meltzer.
They're really this fired up over this fucking insignificant of a topic. This should be rich.
Well, let's hear what it is, actually. Let's go to this from Wrestling Observer Radio, Bryan Alvarez and Dave Meltzer.
Then Deonna Purrazzo did a promo. Hikaru Shida is facing Deonna Purrazzo the night before she gets a championship match on pay-per-view.
Yes.
Why?
But it's not for the title shot.
I know, but it's just weird.
It's just a match, just to give her a win. You know. I mean, that's happened only a billion times in wrestling. It's not anything to get worked up over.
I don't think Cody is doing a singles match the night before WrestleMania facing Roman Reigns. I'm positive that did not happen.
Okay, but guess what? You could probably count the times that the challenger champion wrestled a match on SmackDown before a pay-per-view, or on a Friday show, or on the Go Home Raw when they didn't have Friday or whatever. It happened all the time. This is not unusual whatsoever.
I want someone to go back and check this one out.
Hundreds of times.
Oh, good Lord.
The challenger for the world title the next day, wrestling on SmackDown.
No, on SmackDown on the Friday before the pay-per-view, wrestling in a match.
The day before.
All the time.
A singles match, the challenger for the title.
All the time.
All right. Someone's going to find this. I guarantee it.
All the time. All the time. It happened in WCW before their pay-per-views. All the time. It happened on Mid-South Wrestling.
I'm not talking about
television.
that. I'm talking of late. I don't want to go back to Mid-South Wrestling.
I'm talking about. I
don't want to see the Mulkeys in 2024.
I'm just talking about the history
they
of
could
wrestling.
do a hell of a
This
job.
is done.
The Mulkeys could do a hell of a job in 2024.
They're as big as the Bucks.
All the time.
I was just going to say, I think now they're just grating on each other, because this is not normally something that would have been of the importance that they would bother to natter at each other about. Could it be that their long, happy marriage has been hitting the rocks and they're just on each other's last nerve?
It has seemed obvious to me in the last several things we've reviewed of them that Bryan Alvarez, although I'm pretty sure he probably wouldn't agree with a lot of our judgments on the wrestlers he likes or the style of wrestling he likes or whatever it may be, I think he knows you can't deny the reality of AEW's TV and their booking and the formatting and how nothing ever makes any sense. And Dave, it seems, never gives up on arguing that
trying to figure out a way
that something AEW related does make sense. And there is some sort of logic behind it. And again, Hikaru Shida has a world title match on Saturday. Why does she have a match against someone who's relatively pushed in the women's division there the night before? Let's go back to this.
This is not the slightest bit unusual.
I find this very unusual nowadays.
I have no idea why, because the idea of a challenger for a championship winning a match on the last television show before the big championship match is a cornerstone of pro wrestling.
So you're telling me that when they do that Solo Sikoa Cody Rhodes match,
I don't know.
Solo's going to wrestle Friday night? I don't think
he might not. I mean, it's not like it happens every single time.
They'll do a contract signing, or they'll do face-to-face. He ain't having a rando match.
That's WWE this year. If you look at this year wrestling, this is like a cornerstone. You put the challenger over on television right before the pay-per-view or before the big show, before the stadium show, before that. It happens constantly.
Mercedes.
You haven't watched. It's television.
Well, let's stop it for a second. There's another little bit here. What do you think of that idea? Again, we're talking about modern wrestling. We could look at examples and things that happen historically from territories or various other companies, but we have to look at it under the prism of what's happening now. Should someone who's going to get a big match on a live national broadcast like a pay-per-view, should they be in a long competitive match the night before?
Well, there you go. And these two chuckleheads aren't really articulating either of their positions well, and they might find someplace to claw into each other in the middle, because I think it'd be perfectly acceptable if the guy going for a championship, or the girl in this case, going for a championship on the big show this weekend, the night before or the week before on TV, they beat some job guy, get a decisive win, or do an angle as they were talking about, or a contract signing or whatever. Having a match shouldn't be ruled out as just a goddamn absolute, but having a competitive match with another semi-pushed individual, whereas in AEW, however much time they're given, it's going to be as competitive as can possibly be, regardless of who's being pushed. That's what's detrimental and shouldn't be going on, in my opinion. But I will leave it there so that we can hear from the experts.
So let me just ask you, do you see that as being different? And again, when you were doing WCW pay-per-views, if there was a TV show on TBS that same day, it was clearly taped. It wasn't a live show into the
pay-per-view. And most people understood, but now they did it in the Attitude Era also, and in the Monday Night Wars when everybody knew that was live. But traditionally, up until that time, the people knew that the shows were taped to begin with, so you'd be seeing the wrestler on that show in a positive light that's going to be on the live pay-per-view tomorrow. That's why we got to pay for it, because we want to see it live.
And there's a difference between beating a preliminary talent in a preliminary match the day before and having, like you said, a long competitive match.
That might actually fucking help if they, beat some guy and look like a world beater, rather than getting waltzed across Texas by some middle card fucking guy right before you're supposed to look like you're going to be the next world champion.
Well, let's go back to this audio another little bit here.
It's television. That's exactly what you do.
I watched every single SmackDown. The challenger, not one time this year, is the challenger for the title wrestled on the Friday before SmackDown. Not one time this year.
I have no idea if that's true or not, but it doesn't matter because, it's SmackDown in 2024 is not the history of wrestling. And it's not the history of wrestling booking, and it's not necessarily the greatest booking ever. It's like I'm talking about something that this is a ridiculous.
It is. And my point is,
well, let me stop it for a moment. There's more, but it's hard for Dave to articulate this, isn't it?
Well, it's hard for Dave to articulate anymore, to be honest with you. Something happened in a short circuit between his tongue and his eye teeth, and now he can't see what he's saying. But they're just picking at nits over each other at this point because, again, who gives a shit about the girls' situation when the house is on fire, so to speak, over there?
So to speak, and literally. Let's go back to this.
I don't care, but it's like weird. Like, this is supposed to be a big match on Saturday.
It's not
Why
weird.
Is she facing Deanna the night before? Deanna's supposed to be like a star.
It's not weird. It happens all that even better. That she's a star, that makes it even better. It's a bigger win. That's exactly what you do. I know when I was growing up, before the frickin' Cow Palace show on the Saturdays TV, that afternoon.
That's fine for the 70s.
Okay. It's not just the 70s. You could do it in every decade.
In the 60s.
Constantly. It is a cornerstone of wrestling that you put the challenger over on television in his run to, I don't know.
Not in his run, the day before.
The day of when you had same-day TV, they did it everywhere, all the time. It was a regular occurrence because this is ridiculous.
The Bucks are backstage.
And that's the end of that.
Lord.
And ridiculous.
Again, we've talked about when the local towns had live studio TV, they'd do an angle on the Chattanooga TV that aired at 5:00 live from the studios to juice up the card that night at the Memorial Auditorium that started at 8:00. But if a guy's going for the world heavyweight title, he wouldn't be having a 20-minute match against somebody else. They'd be jumping somebody and hitting them with a chair. That kind of juicing it up. Oh, poor Dave and Brian. I hate it when, maybe a marriage counselor.
See, the problem is Alvarez is looking for logic, and Dave's trying to explain away the logic. Alvarez was just saying here, it doesn't make any sense that they'd be doing this. And Dave won't even listen to that. That's kind of what Tony Khan's like. He convinces himself of what the answer is, and then we see what
And then
happens.
he'll just kind of, oh, tut. Oh, no, you just don't understand.
I study this.